The horrific murder of Jennifer Johnson shocked the residents of Pine Hill, a sleepy, lovely village. An act of passion and treachery disrupted what seemed to be a quiet, close-knit suburban community, exposing the murky side of seemingly perfect lives. Two couples' lives, Mark and Jennifer Johnson's and Daniel and Linda Garner's, intertwined in ways that would eventually result in infatuation, dishonesty, and murder. Respected architect Daniel Garner was well known for his endearing personality and apparently ideal marriage to devoted schoolteacher Linda. The Garners' closest friends were accomplished financial advisor Mark Johnson and his wife Jennifer. Beyond weekend trips and neighborhood cookouts, the two spouses also participated in a voluntary wife-swapping arrangement that at first added excitement and originality to their lives. However, there were risky feelings simmering beneath the surface of this unusual way of existence. Linda, Daniel's wife, was painfully aware of his growing addiction as his curiosity with Jennifer turned into an all-consuming obsession. Sensing the depth of Daniel's sentiments, Jennifer made the decision to terminate the relationship without considering the potentially fatal ramifications of her choice. After 10 years of marriage, Daniel and Linda Garner's union seemed to be a picture of stability and contentment to others. Daniel was a well-known and accomplished architect who possessed a captivating demeanor and inventive creations. Linda was a well-liked and well-respected third-grade teacher among her peers. Linda took great delight in her well-kept garden, which surrounded their quaint home on Maple Street. 5 years ago, Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pine Hill and made friends with the Garners right away. Financial advisor Mark was gregarious, friendly, and the life of the party. Jennifer has an equally captivating personality and stunning good looks. The Johnsons changed the dynamic in the neighborhood, and because of their respect and common interests, their friendship with the Garners grew. The topic of wife-swapping was initially up at the Garners' house at a dinner party. Driven by wine and a spirit of exploration, the subject of open partnerships came up. To the amazement of all, the idea elicited more curiosity than alarm. In the ensuing weeks, the concept was given additional thought, and everyone agreed on ground rules and boundaries to protect their core relationships. The initial meeting was exhilarating but uneasy. Mark and Linda, as well as Daniel and Jennifer, switched partners for the evening. It was an exhilarating and frightening event that left them wanting more. What began as an occasional experiment quickly turned into a routine aspect of their lives, igniting a spark in each of their relationships. At first, the plan appeared to be effective. Both pairs seemed more content and bonded. They continued to engage in social activities, frequently throwing get-together parties and taking trips together. They took great care to keep their secret and only spoke about it in private or in the privacy of their houses. There was an excitement that came with the arrangement's novelty, and for a while it appeared like they had struck the right balance. But as the months went by, little alterations started to show up, especially in Daniel's actions. He began to express a remarkably high level of interest in Jennifer, frequently looking for excuses to spend time with her alone. Though she was hoping it was simply a phase, Linda ignored his growing obsession. Mark did not appear to be aware of the mounting tension either. Though the others were unaware of it, Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was evolving into something more sinister. He discovered that he couldn't stop thinking about her, reliving their interactions and wishing he had more time to spend with her. An innocuous adventure was gradually turning into an obsession that would have disastrous effects on everyone concerned. Daniel had developed an all-consuming fixation with Jennifer. It was no longer just a thrilling intrigue. He couldn't stop thinking about her, reminiscing about their interactions at family dinners and business meetings. His passion, his architectural ambitions, now seemed less important than his desire to be with Jennifer. He began looking for ways to be close to her, offering to assist with chores that Mark typically took care of, or making more frequent invitations for the Johnsons to stay. Linda started to see her husband's transformation. She initially put it down to the excitement of their new way of life, but it quickly became apparent that Daniel was more interested in Jennifer than they had agreed. When they weren't with the Johnsons, he grew agitated and aloof, and his talks would frequently focus on Jennifer's preferences, oddities, and routines. Linda confronted Daniel one evening as they were clearing away from a dinner party. He responded defensively, brushing off her worries as jealousy. Linda let it drop, but continued to watch him closely so as not to upset the delicate balance they had built. His habit of fixing his long, unneeded stares on Jennifer during parties only deepened her suspicions. Jennifer also started to notice Daniel's increasing fixation. She was flattered by his attention for a moment, but then she felt awkward. His words became less acceptable and his touches more possessive. When she confided in Mark about her unease, he dismissed it, assuming Daniel was simply more affectionate. Mark's casual demeanor made Jennifer feel alone in her worries. A weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin marked a turning point in the situation. The retreat was organized by the couples as a means to unwind and spend some time apart from one another. But the vacation did nothing but emphasize Daniel's obsession. By insistence on bringing Jennifer out on the lake by herself and abandoning Mark and Linda, he took full advantage of Jennifer's time. There was a noticeable tension, and Daniel subtly resisted Jennifer's attempts to put distance between them. Daniel crossed the line with a comment he made one evening while sitting by the fire. He talked about starting over, just the two of them, and leaving everything behind. Startled and uneasy, Jennifer excused herself and headed straight to bed. After listening in on the conversation, Linda confronted Daniel once more. Even though he was less contemptuous this time, he would not admit how deeply he felt. Linda became further irritated at discovering the depth of Daniel's fixation. She loved her husband, but she was becoming more and more conscious of the possibility that their friendship with the Johnsons and their marriage could be destroyed by his obsession with Jennifer. Her attempts to step in failed, and Daniel's actions just got wilder. Beyond their scheduled encounters, he began to follow Jennifer, making appearances at her yoga sessions and even at her job, posing as friendly drop-ins. Jennifer felt uneasy, then afraid. She confided in a close friend, who suggested that she keep as much distance from Daniel as possible. Jennifer made the decision to completely terminate the agreement in an effort to seize control. In doing so, she hoped that Daniel would come to his senses and that they could all move on from this chapter without doing any more damage. One evening, Daniel unexpectedly dropped by the Johnsons' home while Mark was away on a business trip. Though shocked, Jennifer allowed him in the hopes of averting a confrontation. The tension between them was palpable as they sat in the living room. Daniel told her how much he loved her and talked about their possible future together. Horrified, Jennifer attempted to talk sense into his head by telling him that their arrangement was never intended to last longer than a brief thrill. Jennifer's apprehension transformed into rage as Daniel's statements grew more forceful. Before it damaged her marriage and her friendship with Linda, she understood she had to stop this. She made it clear to Daniel that their arrangement was ending and that he should respect her limits as well as her marriage. Jennifer resisted Daniel's attempts to talk her out of it, even though Daniel was obviously shaken. Jennifer stayed away from Daniel for the following few days in the hopes that he would change his mind. Linda listened to her confession with a troubled heart. Although Linda wanted to help Jennifer, she also felt a perverse devotion to Daniel because she knew her husband's attachment had reached an unhealthy level. She assured Jennifer that she would speak with him in an attempt to defuse the situation. But as Daniel's devotion grew, he began to show up at Jennifer's place of employment, waiting for her after hours and sending her messages declaring his unwavering love. Feeling more and more uncomfortable, Jennifer made the decision to approach him one last time in the hopes that he would see the seriousness of his conduct. They got together in a quiet area, far from prying eyes. Jennifer restated that his behavior was inappropriate and that their agreement was terminated. She begged him to go on and let go. Daniel became desperate because he couldn't accept her rejection. She was manipulating his feelings and luring him on, he claimed. Keeping her cool, Jennifer demanded that they separate and go back to their own marriages. They had no idea that Linda had trailed Daniel to the park. She stood back and watched the altercation play out, her heart racing. She saw the resolve on Jennifer's face and the agony on Daniel's. Linda worried what might come next, even though she knew that this encounter was unavoidable. Daniel's despair turned to anger as the dispute grew more heated. To have Jennifer reject his fantasies felt like a betrayal on a personal level. Using foul language, he yelled at her, telling her that she had ruined his life. Jennifer refused to be intimidated and kept her ground while fighting back tears. Linda felt a wave of panic as she observed from shadows. She was aware that she had to step in before things went out of control. She emerged from her hiding spot and walked up to the two, calling out to Daniel with a trembling voice. Daniel appeared to be relieved and confused when he saw Linda, as if she had just snapped him out of his wrath. Using the diversion as an opportunity, Jennifer turned to leave as much space as possible between her and Daniel. Now that she and her husband were alone, Linda attempted to soothe him. Though she pretended to be optimistic that they would overcome this, she was aware that their lives had been permanently altered. Jennifer's choice to terminate the arrangement had started a series of events that could not be reversed, and the affair had reached its breaking point. After everything had settled, it would become clear how deeply involved Linda was and how obsessed Daniel really was, which would lead to a terrible and violent ending. Daniel was inconsolable after the altercation in the park. He was completely taken aback by Linda's sudden entrance and Jennifer's stern denial. That evening, he came home to a maelstrom of betrayal, fury, and sorrow in his mind. Linda sensed that a storm was building inside of Daniel and attempted to calm his racing mind, but Daniel refused to listen. Daniel grew more and more irregular in his behavior over the next 3 days. He alternated between fits of deep despair and furious outbursts. His days were consumed by his fixation with Jennifer's rejection and the apparent injustices he had experienced. He quit his job. Unable to get through to him, Linda sensed her own anxiety and frustration mounting. Though she knew something had to give, she was unprepared for the unexpected and dramatic turn of events that was about to happen. Jennifer, though, was determined to make progress. She stayed away from Daniel at all costs, concentrating instead on her career and her bond with Mark. She was afraid of her husband's response and the possible consequences, so she hadn't disclosed to him the whole degree of Daniel's preoccupation. By severing their relationship, she believed Daniel would finally accept the end of their arrangement and go away. When Jennifer got home one evening from work, Daniel was waiting for her outside her house. The sight of him made her heart sink, and she braced herself for further conflict. She moved cautiously toward him, telling him to get out in a calm but forceful voice. Daniel implored her for one final chance to explain himself, his eyes wild with desperation. Sensing the talk was pointless, Jennifer attempted to get past him, but Daniel took hold of her arm. Jennifer noticed that he was insane, and his hold was painfully tight. She strained to free herself and raised her voice to ask that he release his hold. Someone in the neighborhood heard the boom and went outside to investigate. When Daniel saw the neighbor, he let Jennifer go and ran away. Shaken and terrified, Jennifer thanked her neighbor and ran inside. In an attempt to find a solution without calling the cops, she gave Linda a call. Sensing the worry in Jennifer's voice, Linda decided to get together the following day to talk about how to deal with Daniel's being more and more erratic. Linda met Jennifer in a nearby cafe the following day. Jennifer described the meeting with Daniel and her mounting concern for her safety, appearing worn out and anxious. Linda listened carefully, trying to come up with a solution as her thoughts raced. She informed Jennifer that their relationship was finished and that she would speak with Daniel. When Linda got home from the conference, she discovered Daniel agitated. Her voice was a mixture of worry and rage as she addressed him about the event with Jennifer. Sensing he was surrounded, Daniel yelled at her, calling her a traitor for siding with Jennifer. As their disagreement got more heated, Linda withdrew to their bedroom out of concern for her personal safety. Daniel's thoughts darkened that evening. He was unable to understand that his own wife was against him and that Jennifer had rejected him. In his deranged mind, he thought that removing the cause of his suffering was the only way to make things right. He came to the conclusion that nobody could have Jennifer if he couldn't. Daniel arrived at the Johnsons' home on a clear, cool night. He was aware that Mark was alone in the city, leaving Jennifer. He entered the bedroom through a side window and proceeded to where Jennifer was sleeping. His anger and despair were increased by seeing her, content and oblivious. With a jumbled mixture of hate and love racing through his head, he reached over to her with a kitchen knife. When Jennifer woke up, Daniel was standing over her, and the knife was shining in the low light. She attempted to scream, but Daniel's firm, unwavering grip prevented her from opening her mouth. He slashed the knife deep in her chest in a moment of wrath, cutting off her cries. Daniel stood over Jennifer, her life slipping away, his head a jumble of contradictory feelings. After Jennifer was killed, Daniel left the scene with Jennifer's blood on his hands. When he got home, Linda discovered him shaking and unable to speak. She knew right away what he had done. In a fit of misplaced loyalty, she chose to assist him in hiding the crime. Everything was on the line, their secrets, their life they had built. Linda realized they had to take swift, determined action if they were to survive. Driven by a perverted feeling of self-preservation and loyalty, Linda seized charge of the situation very fast. She told Daniel to take off his clothing and wash the blood off before leading him to the restroom. Her thoughts were filled with the gravity of their situation. She was aware that they needed to move quickly to hide the crime and keep their secret safe. Their covert existence. Linda gathered Daniel's clothes and put them in a plastic bag while he stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet. She washed the area where he had walked, being careful to remove any bloodstains. After cleaning him off, she made him sit down and tell her the entire story of what had transpired. Daniel gave a sobering narrative despite his emotional state, his voice quivering from the gravity of what he had done. Linda thought a scheme. They had to get rid of any evidence that connected them to the crime and come up with an alibi. To make sure their alibi was supported, she called a reliable acquaintance and claimed that Daniel had been with her the entire time. She then took a car to a remote part of the town, where she set fire to the murder weapon and Daniel's bloodstained garments, hoping that the flames would destroy any last bits of evidence. Everyone in the area, including the Garners, was questioned by the police. Linda's well-constructed alibi held up to closer inspection, and Daniel, though clearly upset, avoided arousing suspicion. With no solid leads leading to the Garners, the inquiry appeared to come to a standstill. Daniel and Linda were both greatly affected psychologically by the murder, even though they were initially successful in avoiding the authorities. Daniel was convinced that the police were pursuing him, which made him more and more paranoid. He distanced himself from friends and co-workers, entangling himself in a web of remorse and terror. Although she appeared calm, Linda was under pressure from their secret. She went into overdrive, examining every exchange and movement for clues that anyone nearby may be suspicious. For the Garners, the weeks that followed Jennifer's death were a swirl of stress and deceit. As the stabilizing force, Linda kept Daniel's anxieties under control while making sure their public persona held firm. She was happy that the police didn't appear to have any strong leads, as she kept an eye on the news for any updates on the inquiry. But Linda realized they needed more than an alibi to keep their cover intact. They had to come up with a story that would take the focus off on Daniel. She advised Daniel to seem more grieving over Jennifer's passing in order to blend in with the community's sorrow and allay any suspicions. Daniel acted as the bereaved buddy at parties and neighborhood meetings. They spoke of Jennifer with a mixture of affection and regret, frequently shedding tears from his eyes. Mark, who was heartbroken and in need of explanations, appeared to value Daniel's compassion and never suspected his friend was complicit in his wife's passing. Daniel's mental health continued to worsen, and his guilt began to show themselves as hallucinations and nightmares. He began abusing alcohol severely in an attempt to find comfort in it, but his escape was fleeting. Linda watched him carefully, frequently staying up late to make sure he didn't leave the house out of fear that he could confess in a drunken stupor. Daniel broke down one evening while he was hunched over a drink of alcohol. He told Linda that he had to come clean because he could no longer bear the guilt. Panicked, Linda attempted to soothe him so they could keep their cool. Linda proposed that they go on a quick trip outside of town. They made their way to a remote lodge in the mountains in the hopes that Daniel might find some measure of calm with a change of scenery. They were able to plot their next course of action during their brief period of relief from the ongoing probe, thanks to the seclusion. Linda emphasized the value of their confidentiality to them while they were at the cabin. She trained Daniel until he could answer without hesitation, giving him advice on how to deal with public speaking and police interrogation. Linda's unwavering commitment to maintain their lifestyle and prevent incarceration drove her to tell their story accurately. The Garners continued their life in Pine Hill with a fresh sense of direction. Even though he was still troubled by what he had done, Daniel was able to put up a stronger front. Linda kept an eye on their dealings with the public, making sure they stayed out of trouble. But their facade was starting to show some cracks. When friends and neighbors saw Daniel's increased alcohol use and unpredictable conduct, rumors that he might have been involved in Jennifer's death started to spread. Though ever watchful, Linda tried to put an end to the whispers, knowing that their time was limited. As the police inquiry went forward, more information surfaced that suggested Daniel's alibi was inconsistent. The meticulously built world of the Garners was about to come tumbling down, and the truth was closer than it had ever been. Detective Mitchell conducted separate interviews with the Garners, taking note of any inconsistencies in their accounts. Under close examination, Linda's well-constructed alibi stood up, and Daniel's emotional state appeared to be that of a friend going through a difficult time. But Mitchell had a gut feeling that there was more to this story. New evidence surfaced throughout the course of the weeks. Daniel's fixation with Jennifer was evident in a string of increasingly desperate texts that he sent, according to forensic examination of Jennifer's phone records. Mitchell pulled Daniel in for more interrogation, probing him on the details of his relationship with Jennifer and the contradictions in his alibi. Struggling to remain composed, Daniel repeated the narrative Linda had instructed him to tell, but the detective's misgivings were only stoked by his trepidation and evasive responses. The pivotal moment occurred when a neighbor disclosed important information. On the night of the murder, they had noticed Daniel's automobile parked close to the Johnsons' home and recalled his odd conduct. The forensic evidence, this testimony, and Daniel's unpredictable actions were sufficient for the police to get a search warrant for the Garner's house. Even though Linda had cleaned everything thoroughly, the police discovered during the search that there was still evidence of charred clothing and blood that had seeped into the flooring. Daniel's culpability was made abundantly evident by this incriminating evidence, which was supported by the phone records and witness accounts. Linda understood that the Garners' carefully constructed facade was about to collapse as the net closed in on them. She was aware that devising a fresh strategy that would place the responsibility elsewhere rather than on them would be their only opportunity to avoid serving a long prison term. Linda and Daniel had to face the harsh facts of their situation as the cops drew closer. The truth was going to come out in a way they could never have imagined, and the falsehoods and dishonesty that had once shielded them were now threatening to come apart entirely. Detective Mitchell got ready to move as the evidence against Daniel grew. She summoned Daniel in for more interrogation, but she asked him questions in a different way this time. She presented all of the information they had obtained, including the forensic results, witness statements, and phone records. Confronted and overpowered, Daniel started to crumble under the strain. Mitchell persisted, implying that Daniel might be given a lighter sentence if he confessed. Daniel eventually lost it because he was too overwhelmed by his remorse and the constant interrogation. He described his fixation, the confrontation, and the moment he lost control as he admitted to killing Jennifer. But Daniel also named Linda in his confession, exposing her complicity in the crime's cover-up. He told how she had assisted him with clearing the area, getting rid of evidence, and creating an alibi. Perceiving the chance to obtain the complete account, Mitchell also brought Linda in for interrogation. Linda first denied any involvement when confronted with Daniel's confession, but as Mitchell went over the evidence in Daniel's narrative, Linda came to the realization that there was no turning back. Her skillfully crafted lies had finally come undone. She came clean about her assistance to Daniel, stating that it was motivated by a misplaced sense of loyalty and her fear of losing everything they had worked so hard to create. Pine Hill and the surrounding area were enthralled with the Daniel and Linda Garner trial. Reporters and interested spectators crowded the courtroom, eager to see how the terrible story would end. Linda was charged with obstruction of justice and accessory to murder, while Daniel was charged with first-degree murder. Both defendants entered guilty pleas to their counts. Daniel received a life sentence without the chance of release. Because Linda cooperated with the inquiry and had a clean record before to this, she was given a lesser sentence despite her involvement in the cover-up. She received a sentence of 15 years in jail, with 10 years of release possible. After leaving to gather the pieces of his broken life, Mark Johnson took some comfort in the fact that justice had been done, but he still grieved for his wife.